and welcome back to the Beyond Broadcast podcast, a show which takes a behind-the-scenes look at industry professionals and their lives working in the broadcasting and entertainment industry. Today, I'm speaking with New Zealand's most recognisable entertainment reporter, Kate Rodger. From the radio booths to the high-stakes red carpets of Cannes and the Oscars, Kate's journey is one of relentless curiosity and kind of displaying the art of the pivot, navigating the closure of News Hub by embracing a vibrant, as she called it once, a portfolio career. She's known for her uncanny ability to read a room in 20 seconds and her unwavering commitment to champion local filmmakers. She's interviewed everyone from Tom Cruise to Timothée Chalamet, and beyond the cinema, she has become a powerful voice for menopause visibility, and she's also a fantastic mum. So welcome to the show, Kate, and lovely to have you, mate.
Honestly, I'm at that age and stage, Jamie. If you're going to say nice things about me, I'm just going to burst into tears because that's kind of how I roll. Aren't you lovely? Thank you for that intro.
Oh, mate, I think your career speaks for itself, Kate, and it's a winding road. There's a lot of avenues that we need to go down. I say this with many guests, but you especially, there's a lot going on here, and I think the best place for us to start, and you probably already know where I'm going with this. You were born in Suva to Kiwi parents and then moved to New Zealand at 5. Now, that's a pretty crazy start to life, and do you still look back at that time now? I know it was years ago, but is there still early memories of that time in the islands, or was it kind of like a very far forgotten, far removed time in your life?
Your question could not be more pertinent because just at the end of last year, we took my dad, who's now 86, back to Fiji for the first time with me, my younger brother and my younger sister. So both me and my brother were born in Suva. And we'd all been back individually, but we'd never been back together. And it's so interesting because I remember the first time I returned to Fiji after having left at the age of 5. I was 18 and I walked out of Nandi Airport. And again, I was younger then, but I still burst into tears. Just the smell of the frangipani. I couldn't really feel like I remembered much about it, but we know they're formative years, especially kind of 0 to 3 and then 3 onwards. You really start to have embedded memories. And it was just a sensation. It was the smell of it. And now I go up. I got no family or anything in Fiji, but I go up as much as I can afford to go up for holidays. And I've taken my son Max up there and my stepdaughter Jada. And it's just it's a really special. It's weird to be born in Fiji. To two Pākehā parents from New Zealand, but I love it, and I love the kind of start to life that it gave me for many reasons. I love the feel of sand in between my toes and all of that great stuff. So random, I will agree, but definitely still feel like it's somehow part of my DNA, and I think I can still get a Fijian passport, not that I've tried.
That's like something I've heard. Is this kind of going with the easy island life, that everything is just simply easier in Fiji?
Yeah, I think there definitely is an aspect of that kind of island life. And I've been to Samoa since, and Niue, which is just absolutely the personification of island life. And there's just and you know what's also weird? I've been to Hawaii a few times for work, and I didn't really understand how connected all these Pacific islands are, and Hawaii kind of included. And there's little bits of, because I've lived in Auckland a good part of my life, and what a Pacifica melting pot it's always been. So, and now also my son Max is part Niuean because his dad was Niuean, or is Niuean, sorry. So I feel, having been born in Fiji, even though mum's from Taranaki and dad was from Wellington, we're all kind of weirdly this big melting pot, and I blimmin' love it.
I feel like it's almost when you spend enough time around the people, or when you spend enough time around the culture, it kind of rubs off on you. I certainly can say that from the perspective of being in Argentina, which I feel like the Latin American versions of the Pacific Islands in a way. Very much the same sort of vibe, very much the same chill kind of demeanor about everything. And I think, I'm envious of you that you get to have this sort of early developed childhood where you did get to spend a lot of time around that. But one thing I would be curious to dip into is the interesting part for me is that it seems at one point or another, a lot of broadcasters at some point have gone through Christchurch, which is my hometown. You studied broadcasting at the New Zealand Broadcasting School, which I did as well. And
wow,
enough,
about 100 years after I did, though, Jamie.
Oh, come on, Kate, it's not that far ago.
No, babes. Wait. I was on maybe the second only ever course at broadcasting. school.
No way.
Like Brian Pauling days, way back in the day. It was a 3-month course, and it was radio broadcasting only. Literally 1986 is when I did the course, and that only just started that year. And now I know it's grown into this 3-year degree with, radio and broadcasting and probably digital now. So it's kind of fascinating, and it was an amazing course, even if it was only 3 months long. It was life-changing for me anyway.
And Brian Pauling, what an institution as well. Like, I think even when I went there, he was obviously aging out. He was getting to the point where I think he maybe had a couple of years left at the broadcasting school, but incredible man, very influential, I think, in a lot of people's careers. And I think the thing I would be curious about as well is, how was your time in Christchurch? Because I think everyone has their kind of own view of what their time in Christchurch was like. But for you, because it was the early 2000s, and my view of Christchurch at that time is obviously completely different because I lived through the earthquakes, among other things. How did you view Christchurch in that kind of era of like the early 2000s?
I'm going to put that back at you and say, what do you think Christchurch people think of people from Auckland?
I'm not going to answer that question at all. I refuse to answer. I'm not being held to account here.
That's a very, very good step on your part. No, so if you imagine, I left school, went to Barradine up here in Auckland, Catholic Girls' School, and I walked out of the gates of the school with absolutely zero clue what I wanted to do. Scraped through with the university bursary exams from back in the day, and I was just clueless. I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to go to university and do a BA. I didn't want to be a lawyer because I was really lazy, and that seemed like too much work. And I had taken part in the debating team just to get out of classes in that year, and turns out I was pretty good at it. So the debating team coach basically thrust this pamphlet for the Christchurch Broadcasting School into my hand and said, well, you should talk for a living. I mean, you can talk for a living? How fantastic. And I applied for the course very late, but they let me in, and I was the youngest on the course. And I had never lived out of Auckland, obviously, before, because I'd been at school and living at home. But I did what a lot of Catholic girls do, is I left school and immediately got the most inappropriate boyfriend that you can find. And what I ended up doing was going with that particular inappropriate boyfriend that eventually got seen off the property by my dad in a double-barrel shotgun. That's another story, and that was months after the course. But what this inappropriate boyfriend did make me do, he basically locked me up in a caravan. That sounds really dodgy. And he said, you apply for that course. You apply for that course, I think you'll be great, because I was kind of, pissing about and thinking, I don't want to go to Christchurch and do some stupid radio course. He made me apply, and they got my application, and the course had already closed, and Brian Pauling flew out to Auckland, interviewed me, and I got into the course. So it was a real kind of, when you get a message from the universe, that I was kind of meant to be. So I moved down to Christchurch with this boyfriend, so I wasn't on my own, and we lived out in Brighton with friends of his. So from that perspective, it was kind of an odd kind of time, but an intense time, because, I was in love for the first time and all that bollocks. And then I started doing this course. And it was just when I remember sitting there and listening to Brian on that kind of first couple of days. And as we started to get an amazing kind of collection of working broadcasters who would come through and do guest lectures and things, but also that I was just with my people. I haven't found that. I mean, at school, it was a multitude of different things I was good at and not good at, but I didn't really find my tribe, and this was my tribe. So I embraced the course just with so much passion and excitement. And the city itself was a really mixed bag for me at that time. You know where the broadcasting school is, and you had to, I can't remember the name of the street we had to walk up to get up to catch the bus back out to Brighton, but it was round where the cathedral was, where the bus used to leave. And then one day at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was walking back up that street, and there was a police cordon, and there was a whole lot of kerfuffle going on outside a upholsterer's place. And I looked in as I was walking past, and it was a bloodbath. So what had happened at like 4 in the afternoon is two dudes had gone in, and they'd if memory serves me correctly, but they certainly attacked him with a knife. But from what I can gather, they removed an appendage because this guy may have been having an affair with one of their wives or something. It was like this horrific case in broad daylight in a store in Christchurch. And I remember as a little Aucklander, brought up in, safe little Howick, that I was traumatised by the notion that we were all sitting in class 100 metres down the road and some dude was getting murdered up the road. And we used to have to take part in those cop briefings to teach us how to be journalists and broadcasters. And I think at the time there was some 13 or 14 unsolved homicides and infanticides in Christchurch at that time. And most of it was that Christchurch is a smaller place. So, and I was in that where I was knowing what was going on in that level. So it was definitely kind of no way that would have been reflective of the whole city of Christchurch and all the beautiful people in it. And I love Christchurch and I love visiting and going back down. But that was quite formative as part of my 3 months. It was like, man, she's left her cozy little life. And it felt quite different. And I had a couple of really bizarre run-ins with some skinheads in Brighton on the way back from the bus once that gave me quite a fright as well. So it was a real, it was like, grow up, girl, wake up. Because all of that would have happened somewhere in Auckland easily. But I think Auckland was bigger and more spread out. So I don't mean to be all down on Christchurch, and I'm really, really not. But at 1986, it was kind of a mix of those things.
To be fair, Kate, I was wondering when you were going to throw out the term of crime church. To be fair, I still throw it out every now and then, but yeah, it's totally okay.
I've never heard it.
Wait, you've never heard crime church? No, I feel like
never heard it.
The way I compare it is like I feel like Christchurch is like the Birmingham to England. Like basically, I feel like it's gritty, like no Peaky Blinders sort of cultured sort of thing. But yeah, a couple of skinheads running around. Obviously, not so much the case now, but definitely in the 80s and 90s, I know that was kind of a general vibe. And I find it particularly interesting as well that you went into broadcasting out of anything, considering you once described yourself as the sporty kid in high school. How was it that you didn't go into something like sports journalism? Why was it then film that you ended up choosing over, going down a sporting journalist career or something of the sort?
I have never been asked that question before, so I've never ever thought about it. But I reckon it wasn't the sport itself, it was the fact that I am a deeply, quite traumatizingly competitive person. So I played, whatever I did, I played it to win and I played it competitively. So I played netball for many, many years, represented Auckland briefly, but, it was certainly, I was never going to be playing for New Zealand. But I loved it and I threw everything into it and all I wanted to do was win and was a pretty appalling loser. I think should my mother still be alive, she would have some fairly intense stories about the bad behaviour there used to be from me if we lost. So I was just that was my kind of approach to it. And because we were brought up as, I guess Kiwi kids in the 80s, we were very sports oriented, but it was very standard. I played a lot of netball. I did competitive, not even equestrian, I wouldn't even call it. I rode a horse for 5 or 6 years, which I loved. And I played tennis and I played squash. But I feel like all of the things that New Zealand kids kind of did, had a bike, had a skateboard, had a skimboard, all of those kinds of things. So I had a lot of energy, but I was just fiercely competitive. And then as soon as I hit drinking age, my sporting prowess kind of went away. But funny enough, I'm playing in a charity netball match at the end of March to raise funds. It's down in Wellington, actually, for Life Flight. And I'm already traumatised. I just can't imagine what that's going to do to my body. But I can tell you what, I'll get on that pitch and I will be absolutely blinkered and competitive. There'll be no social netball from me, Jamie. It will be, I know it's a charity match, but we're going to freaking win it.
You're turning into a blood sport, essentially. Fair enough. I agree with
at
that.
At my age, it doesn't take much.
Yeah, the only charity that's going to be happening is you actually letting them live after the game if you lose. Yeah, no, exactly. Totally understandable, right. Kate. I feel like it's a fair move. In terms of radio, because you finished studying radio, how did that first gig come about for you? Because I think for a lot of people, it is a classic internship, a lot of knocking on doors, or was it you had someone approach you in terms of that first gig?
I answered a job advertisement for a receptionist at Radio I Limited on Great North Road. And the only reason I was able to break through from being the receptionist and get into a studio is because I was so bad at being a receptionist. They just had to get me off that front desk. I don't have a lot of attention to detail. Definitely a people person unless I don't like the people. That can be troublesome when you're on reception. And a couple of other, I'll just call them incidences, shall I? And I guess I made it abundantly clear what I was there for. So I think I only last on reception maybe 3 months, 4 months at the most. And then I was given a job producing Merv Smith and Alice Worsley way back in the day. And I would produce them during the week, and then on the weekends I was given an announcing shift from 2 till 6 in the afternoon. So it was kind of like this quid pro quo where I would get up in the mornings and do a mix of both of those things. So it was the perfect radio. I've just gone back to radio after years of television, and I'm hosting a show on the Breeze. I'm still doing my Radio New Zealand stuff, but it's back to music radio, and easy listening at that. And it just, radio was my first love. It's the most beautiful way. It's like podcasting. It's except no one talks back. So it's like me just talking at you, Jamie. No one talks back. It's just, I don't know. It's the communication aspect of it is so simple and so immediate, and I love that kind of feeling of a one-on-one connection. So I was 11 years in radio, and I bloody loved it.
I love the fact that you've gone back to the school of Brian Pauling as well, the one-on-one conversation. I feel like that was the most common thing I heard him say. And one thing I've always appreciated as well about anyone that works in entertainment media, especially on radio, is if you're doing a review of a film, especially because you're having to play the audio of a trailer, not the visual aspect of a trailer, the audio of the trailer, that you're still able to accurately describe what is going on, the emotions, the things that go on. I feel like that, if anything, is probably one of the most challenging ways that you have to describe a film accurately for someone who can't see anything that you're discussing.
Well, yeah, it's really important. And also radio is a theatre of the mind. You can tell a story and it can be created in the mind as well. But do you know what? And there's lots of ways when you go, avenues to get into TV. You can be a print reporter. There's, radio is such a marvellous training ground because you've got to use audio before, telling stories with pictures is a different thing again, and we can talk about that. But radio is immediate and one-on-one. But I would argue the best television broadcasters don't lose that. You still should only ever really be speaking to one person, even if it's 1,000 listening, whether it's 600,000 or 1 million, it doesn't really matter. You need to have that sense of intimacy in order to, you used the word authentic before. I think that's the most natural way we have of communicating.
Yeah, and you went from then that job where you were a bad receptionist to then getting some on-air gigs. And then, obviously, we will talk about at some point and touch on the fact that you went away travelling. But before then, you were obviously moving through the waves of radio. But then what kind of caused you to make that decision to be like, you know what, I need to go overseas. I need to drop this down. What kind of was the kicker for you for that?
It was a personal one. My mum died very young at 49, and she died quickly of liver cancer. And she only had sort of, 6 weeks really from full diagnosis to death. And I was working in Taranaki at the time. So I had done kind of commercial radio for Radio I, which I loved. And then this job came up doing breakfast at Radio Taranaki. And Mum was born in Waitara in Taranaki. And I went down there in my school holidays at school to pick boysenberries. So it felt like a natural place for me to go. I was offered 2 jobs at the same time. One was breakfast in Hamilton, breakfast in Taranaki, and I decided to do Taranaki. And the woman that got my job in Hamilton was JJ Feeney. How funny is that? But that's another story. And I was embedded in this amazing life. I'd been down there for a couple of years doing breakfast, big fish in a small pond, really bonded to Taranaki, met some great people, lived out at the beach at Owakura. There are lots of hot surfers and hot snowboarders everywhere who were training to be doctors. It was seventh heaven. At one point, I considered actually setting up a side hustle business of busing single women from Auckland down to Taranaki because all the hot single men were there. I had a frickin' field day, loved it. And then Mum fell ill. And then I came back up to Auckland and I was given a job, thankfully, hosting nights on Classic Hits, which was awesome. So I was doing that when Mum died, and I stayed doing that job for about 8-9 months after that. But what happened, and we've had these conversations over the years, but the guilt associated with being a self-absorbed, unbelievably self-absorbed teenager and young woman, where it's me, 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 me. And when your mum dies really young like that, you don't see the error of those ways in time to return the favour of then flipping over and living beyond yourself and then being there for your mother or your parent. But at the time, I was just racked with guilt that I hadn't been a good child, and also the grief of losing, my mum. We were really close. So I basically moved into the house and became mum. So my younger sister Jess was only 13, so it was huge for her. My brother John was living at home, working as a lawyer, and my dad was at home. So I just moved in and I became the mum. And they let me do that, and I just wasn't ready for it. I have never seen so many dirty clothes on the floor. They all just took them off and dropped them there, and I was expected to wash them. So I was working nights, also working another day job, and I was also playing housefrau and trying to kind of be mum. And I was never going to be mum. She's a much better person than I could ever hope to be. And I kind of lost my mind, and I finally had a full breakdown with some family friends, and we negotiated my release out into the wild, which was, I'm going to go overseas. And I had a lot of debt. So I got another job. I worked 3 jobs for 3 months, paid off my debt, and bought a Macpac and a sleeping bag. And I decided to go travelling for 2 months, 2 years, sorry, not 2 months, and moved to London.
And out of curiosity, why was it that you feel like the guilt was going to be solved by you trying to fill that role of your mother in the sense of like for your dad? No, genuinely curious, because
I know.
I think, like that's such a massive task to undertake, especially the fact that, as you mentioned, you had a 13-year-old sister. What was it that you're like, I can handle this. I can balance the whole high-flying career as well as also trying to be basically the mother figure to my younger sister. Like, where did that guilt come from, and why did you feel like that was the way that was going to kind of solve that sort of like feeling?
I'm Catholic, so you have guilt built into you from baptism. And that was a really interesting experience, that you say, with guilt, because I've refused now to let it rule my life so badly now that probably I make far too many bad decisions. I see it ruin the lives of Catholic friends of mine. It's just, there's no place for guilt, no place for regret, and no place for worry. I'm not saying you can't experience those things, and I'm not invalidating them, but you can't let them define you. And in fact, when it comes to regret and making bad decisions, if you make bad decisions, just learn from them. There's no point regretting them. You can't go back in time. There's just no fucking way. So you've got to, that's kind of I actually thought about getting Je ne regrette rien. I regret nothing tattooed on my wrist, but I got an arrow instead. Who knew? But maybe I will get that at some point. It's one of those weird things. But I didn't recognize it at the time, to be honest, Jamie, that's what it was doing. This is going to start feeling like a much needed therapy session for me, because when you were describing that, you were kind of also describing me in the last 10 years as a hardworking, unexpected parent of my son, trying to do all of those things. So in essence, it was maybe a bit of training, wrong motivation, but and also, we're speaking to a lot of women who might be listening to this, who might have kids or have very full and busy lives. I mean, we're expected to do fucking everything, and that's not to say that the men or our partners in our lives don't do anything. That's not what I mean, but the balance is often very thrown. And I remember interviewing Cindy Crawford years ago. She was promoting Omega watches or something. I got an hour with her in Sydney and sitting down, and this was ages ago, at least 15 years ago. And she said to me the whole thing about women can do everything. She said, women can do everything, but we just can't do it all at the same time. And that for me was like, oh, fuck, yes, gosh, that is an absolutely terrific way to look at it. But maybe we can do everything, but we'll end up in just in the recovery fetal position somewhere in the corner. We tend to, the mental load can be really intense, and the stats absolutely support that. There will often be both parents working big jobs with kids as well, and they're always, 9 times out of 10 will be the one that will come home and cook the meal and get everything going. And I know there are lots of situations where that's not the case, but statistics don't lie. Anyway, I digress. So that was kind of, I think, the motivation at the time I didn't understand. And I think, too, I wanted to be there for Jess. And it's actually been a difficult relationship to try and shake over the decades, because I still feel very, matriarchal with Jess. I guess she's 10 years younger as well, so and there's an age difference there. So it took me a while to shake that sense of responsibility that comes from her going through such a massive piece of grief. And I also think maybe if you transfer nurturing somebody else's grief, then you don't have to face your own.
100%.
There you
like
go. That's
like that move. Was also like an element of being closer to your mother in a sense as well, like that whole period. And
true.
And one other thing that I'd love to touch on is the fact that I feel like there's always a lot of involvements of outside influence. You talk about the fact that your friends are the ones that kind of like sat you down and were like, Kate, like, come on. What's the story here? What's the situation? And how good was it for them to obviously push you in that direction? And when you did finally get on that plane, heading over to London, what was kind of going through your head? Because I know for my sake, I was wondering, what the fuck have I done?
Yeah.
For you, was it kind of like, what am I doing now? But like, how exciting is this? What was that general feeling when you were catching that incredibly long flight over to London?
Oh my God, yeah. And the first, I'd been once, I dated an Air Force pilot for a while, and my first massive long haul overseas trip was because he was stationed in Iran, and he was able to fly to Dubai well before Dubai was Dubai, and I flew to Dubai to meet him, and then we had some time in Greece. I was about 19, I think, and that was my first big long haul flight, and I arrived at Dubai International Airport on my own, and in those days in Dubai, that's basically you will be arrested unless your husband is there to get you into Dubai. So I was sat for 13 hours with an armed dude sitting next to me waiting for Andrew to fly in on his whatever Air Force thing to come and collect his wife before we were allowed into Dubai. So we really are going back into ancient times. So I'd done a bit of travel then. I knew I loved it, and I never lost my love for long haul travel. I mean, I just for work got back from, this is such a name drop, had a couple of weeks in Paris for work, and just getting on a plane, knowing no one was going to ask me to cook dinner. No one was going to ask me to do anything. I was just going to sit in the back row of economy with my headphones on and binge some stuff. And then I was going to sleep. And then I was going to wake up and someone else was going to bring me some food, Jamie. Anyway, so long haul travel and I have been friends for a long time. So all I remember from that flight is I was pumped. I was so blimmin' excited. And I was going with a cousin, Joe, and another friend, and we were just going to see where London took us. And I was only really planning to go for 2 years. I had patriality there, so I can stay longer, but I just thought maybe 2 years will be enough, and then I'll be good to go.
And what was your first place of landing, Kate? I've spoken to other guests, and mine was Brixton. Where were you originally based when you were over in little old London?
Hampstead. West Hampstead.
Yeah, very
I
posh.
know.
Look at you.
Yeah, it was super
Damn.
posh, babes. And we dossed as you do, as you get you try and get a job and get stuff together. It was actually really confronting the first couple of months, not helped by the fact that my brother ran over my cat. And it was also, you had to push yourself out into jobs you didn't know, what it's like there, and you had to register with temp agencies, and then you could see your money running out, and it was expensive, and you're finding your way around, and got your A to Z in your pocket because there was no such thing as Google, and it was really, really challenging and good for me to do that. And I approached that couple of years because all I really wanted to do was travel. So I didn't want a full-time job. I just wanted kind of 3 months here, 3 months there. I, as all Kiwis do, especially Kiwi women, I thought, I'll be a nanny because it's good money and also you don't pay any rent. And I remember I had to take the train down to Surrey somewhere, and the woman picked me up and we went back to her house and I played with her kids, and she was great. We got along really well. And I came down after playing with the kids and she poured me a wine and she said, Kate, I would love you in the house. You and I would get on so well, but you're never going to get a job with kids. And
so
I really didn't.
Let's get on the piss then.
Let's just have a few more wines. Great to meet you, and on and off you fuck. So that was a bit of a wake-up call. So instead, I started applying what we used to call granny bashing jobs, where you look after older people. And I got this incredible job with Lady Mountain, who used to live in Eaton Square in a 2-story full building length, just full of stunning antiques and artwork, with wardrobes full of Chanel, and she was in her 80s. She was the owner of Eagle Star Insurance. So full gentry, the full noise. We had a cook, we had a housekeeper. She had her hair done every day. And I hated it so much. But I got so much money. And I kind of cottoned on because she was, she was a little bit racist. She was a very paranoid. Their children were trying to get all her money, which of course they were. She treated, me like staff, which I was, but that didn't go down well with me. So it was again, that whole, and the class system was so abundantly clear. We used to go each weekend down to the house in Chiddingfold, and where her brother, one of her sons lived, who was such a monumental prick. And he made me eat in the kitchen with the staff. I wasn't welcome at the dinner table because I was colonial. I remember the first time I got there, he allowed me at the dinner table, Jamie, and then I wasn't cutting my flounder, it was Dover sole, darling. We're having Dover sole, and it was the whole fucking fish. And I apparently wasn't, and he asked one of the staff to come and cut my fish for me. It was the closest I've ever come to sinking a knife into a stranger's throat. I hated that whole vibe because we're not equipped for that shit. We're just take us as we are. So that was a real struggle, but gosh, I got a shit ton of money, and enough money that we were able to buy the combi van. 3 months later, and after three-course meals a day, I was 10.5 stone, and I was ready to lose some weight and ready to shake off life as a caregiver. And we drove that combi, Bob the orange combi, got on the ferry across to Calais and went to Europe for 4 months in the combi, my cousin and a friend of mine. So there was always a method to whatever madness I indulged in order to make money to do things.
We'll be right back in just a moment. The Beyond Broadcast Podcast.
I can totally understand that, Kate, because I very much lived a similar life. Yeah, been there, mate. I was a gardener for the rich and famous, and Jesus, I can even attest to the fact I think I was called to help once, which I was like, geez, it is humbling for the fact of just being like, wait, there is Antipodean racism? I did not know this was a thing. I didn't know there was a classism. It's not just
Antipodean. It's just you're from the colonies, babes, and they didn't want you not to know about it. It was very odd. But also how refreshing for us not to have to dial into that bullshit.
Oh, yeah, completely.
I think, and when I went back a second time, because I came home and then went back to London and very much did the corporate thing at Credit Suisse, and it was earning money, and it was a different way to approach London from the first time I went. You just don't let people, and you're a bit more grown up. And it's also, I think, London shifted a bit, and I wasn't working as how we were, I mean, honestly, if they kicked out every Antipodean out of London, the bars would have to shut, and most of the back office of every bank would have to shut. So I didn't really have that attitude as much. And if I did get any of it, it was like, please go fuck yourself.
And I think that's beautiful because you then ended up moving into this global comms role, which seems like such a far cry from obviously the talk of looking after the elderly as well as obviously children as well. And moving away even from radio itself, how did you come across that role, and how was it that you came into working for global investment among other things, or to me it is just a crazy mix. And you talk about interesting characters. The investment world, I met plenty of people that work in that sort of space, especially in London. Yeah, geez, they're a breed on their own. How did you survive that sort of rat race in itself?
Well, just as an aside, I hope you're as obsessed with TV, HBO show industry because I see so many people that I worked in finance with in the square mile. No, I think now that the show's gone completely and brilliantly batshit crazy, maybe not so much, but still, it's a vibe, It's a vibe. And I didn't know it was for me, but I did all of the travelling that I wanted to do in that 2 years, and I did do a small stint working for a small kind of investment company, Geldermans, for a while, made some really long time, lifetime friends there. And so I had a bit of a taste of it on a short-term basis, but then moved back to New Zealand via the Middle East. We did 3 months through Israel, Egypt and Jordan, which was an astonishing trip back. And then I got back into radio, but worked as a reporter here for IRN News, doing radio news as opposed to hosting. And I had 2 years back in New Zealand and met what I thought was my love of my life, certainly a soulmate, and I think probably still is a bit of my soulmate, Nick. And he moved to London. So 2 years later, I followed him back. And exactly that. I thought I've had a decade's experience in radio now, so I'll get a job working for ITN, and they did give me a job. I started working for their first sort of 24-hour radio station. It was kind of like a radio live news thing, and dreadful hours, dreadful money, difficult to get to from where I was living. And also, there was no way they were having an Antipodean voice on camera, on radio, sorry. So I had to, they kept revoicing all my tracks. So it was impossible to kind of cut through. And also, I'm not going to do all that hard work for somebody else to take all my glory. I said I was competitive. I'm just not going to do that. So I just thought, this isn't for me, and it's not the lifestyle that I kind of want, and this feels too hard. So instead, I got a job working for a temporary job working for Credit Suisse, and it turned into a full-time gig. I was working for the IT part of Credit Suisse First Boston in a kind of a comms admin role, a mix of both of those. And I was working for just the most wonderful guy, Ian Saggers, who used to be the keyboardist for ABC, the band ABC.
What?
And
Okay.
you know what IT was like back in the day, though? I mean, these guys were making £2,000 a day, these guys. And this was just as the internet was coming through, you know, it had just been invented before I left. Oh my God, my stepdaughter Jada is so weird. She's just arrived home and she's tiptoeing through like Scooby frickin' Doo. Off you go. Trying not to make a noise, but making a noise anyway.
Bless her.
Sorry about that. Yeah, she is.
Okay.
She's awesome. And I was just like, this is so kind of mind blowing that this kind of money exists. And that was the wake-up call for me. You know, I was early kind of tasked with organising lots of off-sites, and our main offices were at the World Trade Centre in New York, and also at Canary Wharf in London. And my boss would go back and forth at least twice a month, if not more. And then I started joining him in those trips, and I'd organise off-sites and conferences, and then started doing comms around them. And you know, you will have done this, I suspect, where you sit down after a week working in this job at Credit Suisse. I was taken aside by Ian, and he said, do me this one favour. Could you just stop working so hard? Everyone else is feeling awkward. And that's when I kind of realised, just slow it down, babes. Yeah, otherwise, and then you kind of halve your work rate, and then everyone's happy. I'm sure it's different now, but back in the day, I think we came with quite a strong work ethic, and you just had to embrace the Thursday 4-hour beersies, didn't you, at lunchtime?
100%.
Where you had to get your minion to bring your handbag down at 5 o'clock. So it became a very beer culture and a very social time, and New York was the same. And eventually I was spending such a lot of time there that they kind of got a corporate apartment sorted out just in John Street down the road from the World Trade Centre, and I used to do 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off in London and New York. So that was, which sounds glamorous. It was still it wasn't a job that really, really gave me meaning, but what it gave me was money to travel and live the London life that I wanted to live, and the travel that I wanted to do, and with great people. And I think that's probably defined a lot of my work choices. I accidentally, in the last 2 decades, stumbled across a job that I absolutely fucking love with awesome people, and that feels like the lottery. But, you know, sometimes I don't know whether you're lucky enough to get both those things at once, you know.
I think that's cool, though, that you managed to kind of get that perspective, because I think a lot of people go through life either trying to constantly chase the dream or constantly chasing that new position and kind of working themselves to death to really get the end result, which is, this isn't what I wanted. Whereas you kind of had the opportunity to kind of sit down and be like, reassess it, see where you're going to next. And that seems kind of like reflective of the fact that you then returned to New Zealand in 2003, I'm guessing not long after kind of having those years living the glory life in London. And one thing I think would be interesting to touch on, because you're traveling between 2 pretty big powerhouse cities, London and New York. Is that where the kind of even more interest in the film and entertainment industry came about from? Or this was already sitting there well in the background? Because it seems sort of reflective if you're in those 2 cities.
You're so right. And London. So if you imagine that life for me cinematically started with Star Wars, that changed everything. I mean, anyone you talk to that, from Spielberg onwards, it's just kind of what just happened. I kind of already loved going to the cinema, but it was for, International Velvet and all these other random films that were made 30 years before you were born, I suspect. So Star Wars is like, what the fuck is this? And that's when I really started to really be into going to the movies. But it was very mainstream. As a kind of a blockbuster girl, what's open this week, and let's head off and see it. And then the aforementioned boyfriend Nick and I, because we were living together in London, and he was brought up very differently and had a much more omnivorous approach to cinema, art house cinema, whatever it might be called, but everything really, and a lot of foreign cinema. So we just started going, and we would go and go and go. We'd do double features at the Curzon in Shaftesbury Ave. We'd go, wherever, the Electric and Notting Hill. So we would, and the Screen on the Green in Islington, the Prince Charles. And
classic.
What was the one up at Hampstead Heath? Was that the Prince what was that one? Oh my God, that's so irritating. I can see the outside of it.
Yeah, that's irritating for me because I know exactly the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's iconic. But we used to live in Islington, so we used to go to the Screen on the Green all the time. And so that's where that all came from. And I became obsessive about a whole lot of different things. And it was also the advent of the DVD and the VHS, so it was getting obsessed with things like The Matrix and all of that. And I was always hardcore into sci-fi. So, but that was all an interest for me. I didn't really join any dots, and being in New York, it's not like I ever believed I had a story that I wanted to tell as a filmmaker. And in fact, I spent most of my time trying to convince Nick to write a screenplay because I thought he was far more able to do that and more creative and had a bigger story to tell and a bigger vision. So I was just a movie goer, and I guess what London did, especially that second time, is that you can do so much more than you think you can. So what it did is give me the confidence that when I did get back, because in fairness, I'd always wanted to work in TV and I just didn't have the balls, or as I like to say, I didn't have the flaps. So I just didn't have the confidence. And I just thought I was a face made for radio, and that was kind of my thing. But I loved the idea of telling stories with pictures. So that back and forth and the confidence of working for a massive investment bank and managing a huge IT department and organising all of those things, all it did was like, you can give that a crack, which I think I really needed from a confidence perspective. And I think too, because when 9/11 happened, I was sitting in my desk at Canary Wharf, and we had a team of 11 very, very high-tech programmers who worked at the World Trade Center. And I was due to go over and stay in the apartment, and I was supposed to be working that week, and I couldn't for reasons I can't remember, but my boss went over, and he was up in Madison Ave working in the offices up there. And we were doing our 9 o'clock call, and he just said, I've had this, someone said weirdly that there's been a Cessna's crashed into the World Trade Center. And I said, oh, that's weird. We were talking away, and I was trying to bring up on ancient old whatever search engine we used to use in those days, and everything was frozen. Nothing was kind of coming up. And then the whole thing just, obviously the major plane hit, and everything changed. And we had pages, our workers had pages, and they all start, obviously different time in New York than it was in London. And I had to just go, I was paging every single one, trying to get hold of each of them to make sure that they were out of the building. And it was just one of the most surreal days. And they all had to find a phone to ring me. And one of them was in like a phone booth as the second plane hit the second tower. It's just like, it was the most surreal day. Horrific, obviously. And then we were all evacuated out of Canary Wharf because they thought there was going to be a plane hitting Canary Wharf. And so many of my London friends who'd been there for a while, it was a real, is this where we want to live, kind of wake-up call. And New Zealand kind of started glowing like this halcyon God zone where we'd be safe from planes crashing into buildings. So that was kind of a bit of a turning point. And then my relationship with Nick broke up. We did the classic Vegas wedding, but that didn't really save us. And then I was ready to come home, and I was offered a transfer to New York to continue working there, but I was kind of the gloss had gone off it a little bit. So I came home for a wedding and I interviewed with Mark Jennings at TV3 and I interviewed with a person I will not name at TVNZ who laughed me off the premises, and Jennings said, go on then, I'll give you a job. And that's kind of how that worked out.
It's so odd because then I look at the fact that you made your debut on TVNZ not like very recently, and it's just kind of ironic that they kind of, in a polite terms, told you to fuck off, and now you're like, look who's here now.
Well, a year after I got told to fuck off, I was offered a job. So I think they just like to think, we'll just get everyone to train up for a year at TV3 so we don't have to do it, and then they could start poaching us. No, but that's irony's not lost. It was pretty fun. We used to call... honestly, love the competition of TVNZ. Half the place of a news hub in TV3 now anyway, but even in the day, full of such great people. So the rivalry was all very tongue-in-cheek, mostly. And when I first walked into that building for TVNZ to do breakfast, which was a year ago, it was the first time I'd ever set foot. And we used to call it the Death Star, or the dark side. And it's not, obviously, but it was hilarious. And I loved it. Like, the producer of Breakfast is ex-News Hub. The whole place, from John Campbell through to Carol, through to Hillary, and there's so many amazing producers and camera crews, Tori and Hannah and Zoe, they're all ex-News Hub. So it was like being at home, but just we'd moved to a much flashier house, I suppose. That's the way of putting it. Good people doing great work. So but the irony not lost on me, darling. After 21 years at News Hub, it was a pretty surreal feeling.
And how were you able to, when you entered that role at TV3, how were you able to put the pressure on for them to put you in with entertainment and media? Because obviously your background was all in music radio, then moving into investment banking, comms. How did you then manage to convince the team, being like, this is my thing, I'm an entertainment journalist, I want to work in film, television, put me in, coach. How did that even come about? Was it purely by luck? Because from what I've read and what it sounds like, you just basically hassled your bosses until they would put you on the red carpets. Is that kind of how it went down?
Correct. I'm very charming. I'm very, very charming. And also wildly irritating. When a dog that's got a bone. I just knew unequivocally that that's where I wanted to, and it's the first time I'd ever felt that. So if you can imagine, I was, whatever it was, 35. It's like a lot of people are in, I should have, would have, could have again, because je ne regrette rien. But timing is timing, and I felt like I was older. And when Jennings gave me the job, he was delighted to have someone that had all that travel experience, who wasn't 12, who hadn't just come out of tech, and he wanted me in a producing role. He also said to me, and if you're listening to this, Mark, I've told the story a million times, so don't get all uppity, but he just didn't like watching my face. He didn't enjoy my face on camera. Very funny dude. And so every time during the course of my time that I applied before the entertainment thing came up, because I thought I wanted to be a presenter and I wanted to do, in the early days of Sunrise, that's what I wanted to do. He went, yeah, nah, not waking up to that face in the morning, sorry. So he kind of stopped me from doing something, thank God, because I ended up being able to do exactly what I wanted. And maybe he felt so guilty about being mean about my face that he would keep saying yes to things. So you need a budget. If you want to have good entertainment coverage, it's not cheap. You've got to send me to the Oscars. It costs at least 10, 12 grand to do me and a crew at the Oscars. You've got to send me off to do Johnny Depp in Chicago. I mean, you have to invest. And this was back in the day when TV did actually invest, because they had money, because people used to watch it. So it was a combination of those things. But first up, it was a couple of years of just trying to I worked 6 days a week as a freelancer, doing everything from foreign to producing to a bit of reporting. Again, Jennings wouldn't give me a full-time job as a reporter. So I kind of just ended up kind of thinking, where can I go? And Belinda Henley, the amazing Belinda Henley, basically pioneered the entertainment slot on TV3 in those days, 3 News. And she could see my passion and she took me under her wing. And when she couldn't do things, she would bring me on in a deputisation situation. In fact, my very first junket was in Sydney for the original Fantastic Four, the Jessica Alba, way back in the day, and Chris Evans. So it was, and then I slowly started doing a bit more. And then Belinda left to go and live in London. And I just marched into Jennings' office and said, don't you dare give that to anyone else. It's mine. It's all mine. And in that meantime, leading up to that, what I did manage to do, we had a lovely editor, John, based in Christchurch, who was a film aficionado, and he had a thing called Movie Week. It was already in existence when I started at TV3, and it was a 2.5-minute review slot on the 6 o'clock news, mainly to pad out an hour's worth of weekend news when there's no news at the weekend. And he went away because he was a far better person than I was to do work in Mumbai in a voluntary service abroad capacity. And that was the first time I walked into Jennings' office and said, I'm going to do that. And then as soon as I got it into my grubby little hands, I never let go of it. And I rebranded it Film 3, and I started to increase our presence that way. And also at a time where people really wanted that kind of news. It was before YouTube existed, where now you can click on a link and watch 750,000 interviews with Pedro Pascal. That was the only way you could see those interviews. Was by, I'm sure, as you all know from Getting Up, is by watching. And TVNZ did them as well, but I spent a lot of time nurturing those relationships with, head office in LA, but also all of our publicists here, and they were just so supportive. And I eventually was the go-to for getting those really big interviews. And what a time to be alive.
Because I think that was the thing that I always got from any of the interactions or interviews that you were doing in TV3, especially with Film 3, was the fact that it felt like you already had that established connection. And I'm sure that's going to come up later in the conversation, but it was always intriguing to me to see how in depth you were getting with the interviews, but also the connections you'd made. So it totally makes sense that you were ahead of the curve on that. And one of the things that I think would be interesting to touch on is the fact that I'm assuming a lot of people have this massive misconception about junket interviews, thinking that what you're seeing on screen is a cut of an hour and a half or 2 hours. Do you think that's a common misconception, that junkets are literally only 5 minutes? You have 5 minutes to get everything good out. There is no fucking about. Do you think that's probably one of the biggest things that you have people ask you about, being like, how was your 2-hour conversation with Tom Cruise, when in reality it's 30 seconds?
That's right. It's one of the first and really interesting things that I will say that I instantly had no perception of and loved so much about working in television news as opposed to radio is what a team, what a massive eclectic whānau there is every single day. You get there, 9 o'clock meeting, you've got a 50 minutes of dead air to fill, Jamie, with the news of the day. And then everyone goes out and you camera people, graphics people, producers. You've got chief of staff. You've got editors. Where would we be without them? Everyone has to do all of that. And at the end of the day, you've got all of that content filling in out. It's an amazing organic kind of mystery in a way, but it's also not a team of thousands. It used to be, how many, you must have 3 story producers and someone writes, you go and do this, and someone writes your script, but it's not. At TV3, you get your story, you get your talent, you go organise to get the talent, you book a camera, you go and do the interviews, you bring it back, you shotlist it, you script it, you've got to keep it to 1 minute 30, 2 minutes tops, then you've got to get it into editing, and you've got to edit it. And you've got to do that in time for whatever your slot, because you do not want to FTD. Fail to deliver is the worst crime in history. So and often if it's a late-breaking story, you are sprinting in there at 5:45, and you've got a 1 minute 30 story to edit in time for 6:10. It's very exhilarating, also very stressful. So that aside, that was kind of what I'd done for a couple of years. But what I wanted, I wasn't driven by, as you said, the gotcha. I always wanted just for Kiwi viewers to feel like they had a proper, real connection with whoever I was talking to. And in the early days, if I think about the first time Daniel Craig did Bond for Casino Royale, I got a 40-minute interview with him. And when I did Sting, an hour interview with him. And then the second time I did Daniel Craig for the second Bond, I got 7 minutes. And then for the third Bond, I got 3 minutes, because online was born in that time. And then suddenly it went from just doing CBS, ABC, TV3, TVNZ, to Channel 7, Channel 9 with some radio, smattering of radio. Now it was every single online outlet and every single person's day got scrunched. And then publicists worked out that you can't get as many bad headlines out of a 3-minute interview. But what you don't get out is anything of any value. Everything becomes homogenized. But that's another story. But in the earlier days, you were genuinely given a decent chunk. But still you would only have maybe 5 grabs, 6 grabs, or bits of upshot, as we like to call it, what the talent's saying. For me, for a 2-minute story, you'll be lucky if I get 3 grabs and plus overlay of the film. And it is, people are shocked. I just did, as I said, an interview up the road at the Hollywood, and I was just so excited about talking about film that the interview went on for an hour. Those poor buggers, they'll watch a 6-minute story on 7 Sharp next week, and they'll be going, what about all that other juicy stuff? In this day and age now, we can chuck that stuff up online now and people can see the full interviews. But what we're seeing now is podcasters, they're starting to take on the long form that is giving us the nourishment that we want. It also splinters the audience into what we're interested in, which I'm hard out into. So, you click on that podcast, whatever it's going to be, and you're clicking on it because you're interested in steam trains, or you're interested in women who surfed in the 1920s in Belgravia, which isn't a place that you can go surfing in, but you know what I mean. It's kind of it's a different communication kind of landscape for us now, and I love it. But for me, I had to appeal to everyone from Eketahuna and Gore up to Kirikiri. People interested in film, people not. People just want to be entertained. So I have to go in with a very, I'll use the word mainstream, which I hate, but I have to, that's the audience at 6:00 for the news. So I can't go too deep into my sci-fi. I have to remember that it's a conversation that will appeal, hopefully, to everybody. So, to answer your question that you asked me at least an hour ago now, so sorry, is that sometimes you do get a longer slot and you've got to cut it down, or you do only get 3 minutes. And all through COVID, when everything went to Zoom, you'll be lucky to get more than a 4-minute slot with a Timothée Chalamet. So you really have to go in all guns blazing and see if you can get a grab you can hang a story on, essentially.
And you talked about once in an interview, the first 10 to 20 seconds in a room will really set the tone for the rest of the interview. When you're going 100%. in that 10, 20 seconds, what is it that you're looking for, and how is it that you like to set the tone? Because I think a lot of people will take a very different approach of maybe kissing ass massively, or obviously taking the other realm of, asking something that will probably catch them off guard. But how do you set the tone for that first 10, 20 seconds?
That is the most important part, and I've said that many times. It's the walking in, and it's 100% energy. So it's not, I don't mean going in like, full on. I just mean positive, welcoming, genuine energy. And I guess I'm lucky because I guess that kind of energy is my go-to. It's in my DNA anyway. So I'm very lucky. Being from New Zealand, massive bonus.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah. People
has that got you through many doors? Has that got you through many doors and people being like, okay, we can relax a little bit, the Kiwis here?
That's so much so, and especially often I'm the only Kiwi on the junket. Like when you talk about Tom Cruise, when I did him for Maverick on the flight deck of the USS Midway with I'd say 250 journalists. So I was the only New Zealander and the very last one on the line. But and he shot films down here. If you've just got something, it's also all about any good job is prep. And I guess after 20, 25, 21 years of doing those kinds of interviews, I've also got so much institutional knowledge. Firstly, I know what he was like last time. Don't ever expect that they're going to be the same every time. That's not what I mean. And I know kind of you can build that in, but also you only really need to prep whatever's the most recent or this film, or embed yourself in whatever the chat will be. But you come with a whole lot of history. But also they may remember you, but also the publicists have worked with you for a long time, and you cannot underestimate how that chat before interviews goes. And it's a couple of occasions very recently, and it's happened in the past, where I will get scheduled at the beginning of the day just to set the tone for the day. For some people that if they're not that, they can be a bit frosty to interview. I get sent in as kind of the fucking cheerleader to just go, right, you're going to have a fun day and everything's going to be great. And I guess because after 20 years doing it, they trust me not to come fire left with some kind of random political question about Venezuela. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. And that might not be a compliment. Maybe I would have got a a few more headline-grabbing kind of interviews if I was a little bit more contentious, but it's just never been my jam. And I guess it's always been about the film and the movies. I'm not particularly really interested in who they're shagging or what they're up to. So it's, I guess there's an element of that. So to answer your question, 100% energy, eye contact, connecting, trying to connect in that sense, and small talk that just doesn't sound random, because you're not even getting mic'd up because that's a full setup. So you may even have 5 seconds, maybe you'll have 20 seconds. And the first question's the throwaway question. So the first question's the one that doesn't matter for me, and it's often just to get them, first of all, to trust me, to know that I'm not going to be ambushing them. And then the second question is 100% the one that you want, because you never know what could happen, and the interview could suddenly, I can get interviews truncated mid-interview. Flew all the way to Chicago for Johnny Depp, got 2 minutes 40. And so much so that when I did do the edit back in New Zealand, I fast forwarded the 2 minutes 40 at the beginning of the interview to show how short my interview with Johnny Depp was. He went to lunch and stayed there for a long time with a lot of wine. It was a great 2 minutes 40, but it's a terrifying thing to have spent all that money for TV3 to fly me to Chicago for that interview. And then you sit in your hotel room afterwards in tears thinking, how the fuck am I going to get a 5-minute story out of a 2 minute 40 interview? So, you've just got to hope for the best. Some people are not going to respond to anything. And the junket system, in a way, has become more and more ridiculous and inhumane, because you essentially, if they're doing 73-minute interviews, what are they going to do and say? It's grueling. And I've had a bit of an insight from a talent's point of view, Kiwi actor Carl Urban. I've had lots of chats with him about what that's like. I had this most glorious and very accidental hour coffee at the Academy Museum Cafe in LA a couple of years ago when I was there for the Oscars. And Gemma Gracewood, who was editor-in-chief at Letterboxd at the time, and a good friend of mine who lives across the road from me right here, she bumped into him, and then we basically sat down with Guillermo del Toro for an hour and just shot the shit. And I said, look, give me a vibe. I know it's hard for the talent, but talk me through it. And it was so interesting. And from him, you see his interviews, he's so passionate. He's so engaging and so warm and so phenomenal as a storyteller. So, and you have to approach it, he said, with the same discipline you approach everything else that you do as a director, because it comes with the territory. And directors do tend to be more engaged because they've got more on the line sometimes. And I know how hard it is when the film is an absolute dog, how hard it is to promote it. And I get all of that. It comes with the territory, but it also, I'm not saying I don't lack empathy for the talent, because they've just got to do interview after interview after interview. But having that insight from Guillermo del Toro was actually amazing. A bit too late in the piece for me because it was a couple of years ago, but it's just knowing it's hard for them too.
This podcast is powered by WIZZFX. We make brands sound sick. Music, radio, podcasts, sonic branding. If your audio needs to hit harder and stick longer, WIZZFX has you covered. Learn more at WIZZFX.com.
I can say with a whole heart, it's probably the most painful thing I've ever seen, which is a colleague of mine, Jamie. He ended up being what was labelled as the worst failed TV interview. He was the man that's well known for interviewing Bruce Willis, who ended up obviously going absolutely apeshit at him. Him and I used to work in the same office, same radio station. And in that respect, I need to ask, because you once mentioned that one of the coldest and hardest interviews you've had to do was with Daniel Craig, which is so odd, because then you go back and say to me, like, you had a really nice time with him, you spoke to him well. How do you handle going from having a cold and frosty interview to then maybe kind of getting people to warm up and open up a little bit more? Do you have any particular sort of moves that you like to play, or is it kind of you pick and choose your moments and you're like, if this person's in a bad mood, there's no point trying to salvage it? Or do you kind of find new ways of kind of getting people to open up?
Yeah, do you flog a dead horse, I guess is what you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the interesting thing with Craig is that it was the 40-minute one. So he is, first of all, he's an alpha, right? So, and he strode into that room in Sydney in his bespoke 3-piece suit. He had his people trailing in his wake, and he just walked in, owned the room. It was relatively early days for me too, so I would have handled it a little differently a little bit further down the track, but I was pretty new to the game, so I found it deeply intimidating, which is, I guess, what he wanted. Having interviewed him since, he just doesn't suffer fools, and he's not really one for buying into the bullshit. So I get that, and I respect everybody mostly for their behaviour. Was it borderline rude? Maybe, but not really. He was just being whoever he wanted to be. Also, let's not forget, he'd just come off the back of a horror couple of years with all of Britain saying, blonde Bond, he's not handsome enough, what is this guy doing? So he had something to prove, and certainly, I suspect, had no respect for the media. So he came in with all of that kind of baggage. But honestly, it took 20 minutes before he really properly kind of warmed up. And I was lucky because, of course, the film was directed by Martin Campbell, and I'd had time with him already, so I was able to sort of ease in a little bit more from that perspective. And what I choose to do with a lot of people as well, when I talk about that first throwaway question, is not for it to be about them. Because one of the biggest, I think, mysteries is that a lot of people, specifically actors, and let's talk about a Heath Ledger and to a certain degree a Christian Bale, is that, both in the same film, but this is not what they signed up for. So many actors and filmmakers are not extroverts, and they certainly don't like talking about themselves. So you have to kind of factor that in sometimes. And I would put Daniel Craig in that category as well. So it's not their natural go-to, and they're not comfortable about it. So when you pick up on that, one of the greatest things you can do is say, Martin Campbell, what a freaking legend. How would you describe your experience of working with him? And then they understand better when they're talking about other people because they know they have an opportunity to highlight that. Matt Damon, what an absolute king. Same thing. When I sat down with him for Bourne Ultimatum, which is the first time I interviewed Damon, that's all it was. Every question, like my first one was, had you ever imagined you were going to turn into an action star after blimmin' Good Will Hunting? Now you're Jason Bourne, and he said, look, it's all about Tony Gilroy, the writing, amazing. And then, when I did him for, what was the one where he went up, I'm going to forget about it now, it begins with an E, and he had to wear an exoskeleton, and
Elysium.
Sci-fi. Elysium, thank you, knew it began with an E. I interviewed him for that, and, what an amazing role again to get into. Oh my God, the guy's at Weta making me this amazing exoskeleton. He always used to transfer his awesomeness onto someone else, and it's the delicious thing to have that little so little ego. So coming back to Craig, that's kind of how I had time to get around that. And if we think about Jackie Chan, when I flew to Hong Kong to interview Jackie Chan, and I, thank God, again had 45 minutes with him. 20 minutes, it was so hard. His English still, it's great, but not so great that you have a relaxed communication. And it took me at least that to kind of, and then he relaxed and got out. And then, 10 minutes later, he's teaching me Kung Fu moves. And the last 20 minutes of the interview was a freaking delight and ended up on the DVD release of Shinjuku Incident, which I was interviewing him for. So, but if I'd had a 20-minute interview, what would I have salvaged? Also, 10 minutes in, I would have had to panic. So, you've got to, whereas I had 20, I thought I can just let this be what it is for now, and see where it goes. And that's when you have these truncated interviews, you don't have any freedom or time for any real connection, which again is why podcasts have just become the new great thing. Often, if it's Smartless, it's their mates talking to them. If you're a Bradley Cooper and you're busily chatting to Jason Bateman, but any other podcast, you've got time to relax and say things, which is 90% of this podcast that I'll probably regret saying. So it's a different kind of vibe.
Okay, you're hitting all the synapses for me in so many ways because you're referencing so many things. I'm trying not to cry at the moment. The reason I saw Shinjuku Incident, and I remember seeing it with my father, we were the only ones in the movie theater, literally the only ones, was because of your interview. That was the reason why we saw it. Yeah, at 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday, I went to go see that movie. We were the only ones in the movie theater. And the best thing I can remember is my dad coming out of the movie being like, why the fuck did you take me to a movie that I had to read? It was terrible. But I still remember that moment like no tomorrow. And you were the reason I went to go see it because of that interview.
Jamie, stop it.
Still a memory. Still a memory. It's even in my mind. Bloody lovely.
Jackie Chan doing serious
stuff, right?
dug that film too. And I was like, what a privilege to get to interview him. That is so funny. So you would have watched Film 3s on the weekend, but did you watch a bit of Real Late with Kate as well? Were you around for that?
I did indeed. Yes, I did indeed.
I missed that show. We pumped out 39 episodes, myself and EP, Charlotte Purdy, and we just did it. We should have just done 10 episodes and then had a break and then 10 more. But we basically did 39 episodes of Real Late with Kate without a break.
That's mad.
And then, it was madness, all right. And then we production funded the whole thing. I think it was our fault. We introduced production funding into mainstream television, and then TV3 thought, that's a good idea. Let's get everyone to get their own production funding. But what a ride. I needed hospitalisation at the end of it because I was still doing my new sub job at the same time. But, half an hour of film news on television. Those were the days.
Exactly. And it's the thing that I'm going to keep going back to is I feel like television has completely changed now. It's sad that all the ad revenue has been taken out of it. Some would say no good, fuck ads. But personally, I did like the fact that there was still traditional television and traditional formats because I think it really does have a place. And I think I need to touch on this because I know you have a deep love of Pedro Pascal. And
I do
and
have a
I don't
deep
blame
love.
you. He's a very good-looking man. He has a very good moustache. And on that
what
respect,
a sweetheart, though, he is. Like, he's a genuinely lovely dude.
And that's what I mean. How do you then, on the flip side, deal with people that are just so exuberant, like Keanu Reeves being another one that are like a joy to talk to? Yeah, like, how do you handle that? Is there like an element of like you almost have to pull back because you're going to get too much energy almost that you don't get through the interview because you're just having such a great time?
Yeah. I wish I had that sense of discipline, Jamie, that I would say that to myself before I walked in. The Pedro Pascal thing, again, and when I talk about Matt Damon, there are people that you would expect that might have an ego or a way of behaving that, given their lives and the people around them, that there's a superiority there. And you have the right people around you, or you've been working hard enough that when maybe you're later in your career when you hit it, you know that it's not a God-given right and that you can turn around and treat the people around you like shit. And I've seen a lot of publicists and a lot of people being treated badly by people that should know better. And these are the kind of people that just don't. Meryl Streep, another classic example, no airs and graces, just treat you like a human being. And that's the key to those. And Keanu, just to talk about him first, and I have done him quite a few times, all of them for John Wick. Point Break, one of the greatest films ever made, one of my favourite films.
Best reference to New Zealand as well. Obviously, he's escaping to New Zealand. Yeah, he's
paddling. What are you going to do? Paddle to New Zealand? And everyone in the theatre goes, "Oh my God! Yes, did he just mention New Zealand?" Love it. No, but a little legend, and I loved the Wick films. And when I first went into the room and sat down again, it was in New York. And it was a 5-minute slot, and the first question, he paused before he answered and then delivered this like erudite, meaningful, generous answer to the question. And then all you do is, you just know you're in good hands with someone that first of all knows the process and how it has to work, but also he doesn't cheapen it. And also it can often be body language and eye contact is really important. He had a gentle respect for everybody in the room. The last time I interviewed him, it was in LA, and I was the last of the day, and I finished up, got in the lift, went down one floor, and the lift door was open, and Keanu's standing there. He's got a motorcycle helmet in one hand and a backpack on his back. He goes, "Oh, g'day, good to see you, thanks, great chat," and gets in there. No publicists in sight, no one. And I don't think I've ever seen that. Normally they're surrounded by people. And we just chatted in the lift, and then off he wandered out the front of the Four Seasons and got on his motorbike and off he went. And that was just him. And Pedro Pascal, I got exactly the same vibe. Maybe not the motorbike helmet, but it was for Mandalorian. I was second to last of the day. And I walked in and he was just getting the last bit of powder on his nose just to take the shine off. And I was wearing a jumpsuit, very cool jumpsuit. And I was very, very feeling very styly, and he immediately thought that I was looking very styly as well. It was a Tanya Carlson, New Zealand designer, and then started this full interview with everybody in the room because he said, "But what do we call that?" He said, "Is it a onesie?" And I went, "What?" And then somebody, no, one of the camera people, no, it's a pantsuit. And I said, well, no, because a pantsuit doesn't have to join. You can have pants on it. Well, or is it? And then he said, it's a onesie. I said, are you out of your mind? A onesie's pajamas. Anyway, and it was just like the whole tone was set. Everyone in the room's chipping and chiming in. And then I sit down. And of course, I'm talking Star Wars with the fucking Mandalorian. So I'm beside myself anyway. And he just kept, firstly, decided immediately, because I called him Magnificent Mando, that was the only way to address the Mandalorian. But we covered off a whole lot of things as well. Obviously, he'd worked with Melanie Linsky in The Last of Us, and so we had a chat about that. And then at the end, suddenly completely obsessed with my manicure. And I'd been in this business for a couple of decades already by then, Jamie, and I knew what TikTok was, but I wasn't on it. But someone clipped that one grab of him obsessing over my nails, and it went mad on TikTok. People still talk about it, and it's just like, what about my amazing interview with Jackie Chan? What about my extraordinary interview with Tom Cruise? No, I went TikTok famous because of my manicure babes and Pedro Pascal. But what a delight, and I've done him a second time. He's I don't know, and I think his personification of what a toxic masculinity isn't in every way, shape or form, just in his public profile. When he became the boyfriend of the internet, I was at the top of that queue.
Hashtag daddy. Exactly. Completely
Hashtag
agree.
daddy. Oh, that's right. He was daddy, not the boyfriend. He was daddy.
Well, he's a bit of both. I think it depends when he has the beard or not, whether he's boyfriend or daddy, totally dependent. Yeah.
I'll
think so.
trust you. And I also love how it's like his sexuality, no one even cares. Is he gay? Is he bi? Is he straight? Who cares? Who cares? Everybody adores him. And that's the most amazing thing. And they don't, yes, he's hot, don't get me wrong, but it's actually, he's always dancing, he's happy. Again, he just treats everybody with respect and joy. And I think that's what we get with Pedro Pascal that we love.
100%. And I think it kind of translates also to guys like Taika, who you ended up having a pretty wild Oscars story in terms of the fact that it was very much guerrilla sort of filming on the sly. Do you kind of miss that kind of like TV3 era of kind of like filming where you're just like
joking?
Deep in the thick of it?
God, well, I was having some reminiscing and all of that a couple of weeks ago with Ryan Bridge, who I used to work with, and we as hubbers we catch up all the time. We're still all really, really close. We've all been scattered to lots of other different newsrooms. We've got News Hub refugee camps in every newsroom. I've got a swipe pass for every newsroom I think in the city because I'm a freelance slut that goes everywhere to whoever will pay me. But it's kind of, we think about those days. They'll never happen again, not because we're not all together. That's ridiculously egotistical thing to say. But we were such a tight-knit whānau at TV3, and we just didn't have the same resources. We literally didn't have the same resources. Hilary, Barry and I were laughing recently because she's working with an ex-news hubber as well, Hannah Story. And I remember I flew to Sydney to interview Jane Fonda, and Hilary also had an interview on the same day, and I bumped into them at the Intercontinental, and I had flown in on the the 5 a.m. flight that morning on my own, quickly to the hotel, doing all my prep, doing my makeup, and they came in. They'd already been there 2 days. It was a camera person and Hannah, the producer, and Hilary to do the interview, and they were staying the night and then flying home. And I was in and out, did the interview, flew home because News Hub refused to pay my accommodation. I don't know how I managed to get the flights, and we all laughed our asses off because it was like this antithesis of having a bit more resource to tell it, and tell the story better, probably. And me just banging in and out as hard as fast. It was very hilarious, and we've always been that underdog kind of mentality at TV3. So we just never did have as much money. So you kind of had to just roll with the punches. But as a Kiwi as well, it is a number 8 wire kind of thing. And the Oscars was always hard because we never got a full accreditation to be on the full red carpet. We'd only have it to do our live crosses. So whatever we got, we really had to kind of scramble for. But on that Taika's Oscars, and cameraman John Fleming came up to the Oscars that time. We had nowhere to do the live from because we didn't even get accreditation for the live shot. So, and it was Taika. So it was really, really, we knew we're going to have to go from somewhere. And I have told this story quite a few times because it just delights me so much. But you've got the Roosevelt across the road from the Kodak, what used to be the Kodak's, now the Dolby Theatre. And it's one of the, the first Oscars was held there nearly 100 years ago. And it's a beautiful old hotel, but it gets bought out each Oscars either by Access Hollywood or, Entertainment ET or whatever it is. And they basically buy the whole hotel out and turn it into their studios for Oscars Day. And they had done this in this case. So for the first couple of days leading up, we just kind of ingratiated ourselves and made our faces familiar. We just wander around the pool at the Hollywood Roosevelt and chat and come Oscars Day, because we thought maybe we can go live from the Roosevelt if no one stops us. But and they stopped us a couple of times asking where our accreditation was, and we would just leave. But on Oscars Day, they were all too busy to be checking accreditation. So we just wandered up onto the bridge looking down over the pool. Access Hollywood had it beautifully lit. All of the stars were going in and out of there for their interviews, and John just popped the camera on his shoulder and we went live into the 6 o'clock news. And we were off air before anyone worked out what we'd done. No one stopped us mid-live cross. So we thought, fuck it, let's do it again for the project. And we went live into the project as well. And previously to that, finally, Taika said, come and find me. I'm getting into the limo at such and such a time and I'll give you a very quick chat. And so we bowled up into the Hollywood Hills before the Oscars started, and thank God got him on the street just for a very quick how you feeling, what you're doing, where he mocked me mercilessly for saying we're all so proud of you, and he's going, what, we, who else is, I was speaking on behalf of New Zealand, which I should never fucking do, by the way. I've always felt a bit embarrassed about that, and he didn't let me off it, but it was, we're the only ones to get Taika. I was fucking delighted. And then of course he went up there and said kia ora everybody, and won himself an Oscar. So that was a great day, but that's guerrilla. That's like, we shouldn't have been there, and we got the job done. That's all I cared about.
I love that because it's often the stuff that the audience don't see. Like you said, there's the immediate assumption you have the accreditation, you have the permits, I guess, to be there. And is that kind of like one part of the other kind of side that people don't see of like festivals like Cannes, Sundance, and obviously Toronto Film Festival, that like everyone has this image that you attending is really glamorous, when in reality you are just struggling to get a place in line and make sure you can get that piece that you need. Is that largely kind of what it comes down to? There's no time to sit down and enjoy it. You're just there on the ground trying to get whatever you can.
You're hustling, and it's quite a lot of pressure. I used to put myself under a huge amount of pressure, in fairness. And I think I talk about the Tom Cruise Maverick red carpet. It was post-COVID, and I'd had long COVID, and also my fabulous menopausal hormones had come home to roost, and I was really having a slight crisis of confidence. And I really had to get my shit together that day because I knew how hard it was going to be, and that I didn't have a one-on-one with Cruise, so I needed him on the carpet. You're never guaranteed. He'd never let me down up until then because I know that he takes those things really seriously, and I had done him in Paris for Mission Impossible and The Mummy in Sydney, and I thought, he's not going to let me down, little old New Zealand, but you just don't know. And I really had to pull my socks up and do my laces up for that one. It was a real struggle to kind of get my confidence to know that I could do it. And I kind of thought, maybe I'm too old for this shit, and maybe I need, it was a whole lot of different things. But I woke up on the day and I was game ready. So I feel that maybe I had to go through that crisis in order to kind of give myself a good solid talking to. Beautiful day, amazing. But again, 3.5 hours on a red carpet, not knowing if he was going to stop at the end, getting closer and closer to deadline. I was supposed to be filing for News Hub and the project, and I'm not going to lie, I was getting pretty freaking stressed. And of course, by the time he got to me, the publicist, I had to share him with another reporter. She said, you only get one question between two of you. I said, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And I turned to this poor young girl who it was her first red carpet, and I said, this is how it's going to work. I need to be on camera, so I need to ask the question. I don't care which question it is. You can pick one from your 200 questions you've got written down on your card, but I need to ask it. And she was like, okay. And I don't usually behave like that on a carpet, but I was panic-stricken. And I was able to do that, and she gave me a good question, actually, and it was awesome. And I just naughtily chucked a quick Kiwi question in on the end of it, and then I got what I needed and shot a whole lot of other footage as well. So that's how those kinds of things work and the pressure that comes with it. And that's a 20-hour day. You're up early, you're doing your junk, whatever it is, you're on the carpet waiting to go on for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It can sometimes be freezing, raining, or absolutely piping hot. Then you're on the carpet for 3 hours. You can't go to the freaking bathroom. You've got to wait for the talent. Will they stop? Will they not? I did Johnny Depp, flew all the way to LA for one of the Pirates screenings and premieres. It was at Disneyland, outside the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and he just didn't stop. He walked straight past everybody. I had no one and had flown all the way then, and I almost just throwing up with anxiety and stress. And then across the way, as the red carpet was packing up, I saw this woman in pink. She would have been in her 60s, just weeping. And I said to my cameraman, come with me. And we ran across, and I stuck the camera in front of her face, this poor woman, and I said, are you okay, sweetie? And she said, he touched my hand. And then just gave me 3 minutes of absolute fandom. And she was so sweet and so lovely, and just described, why Johnny, this is well before the Amber Heard case, that he was basically Captain Jack Sparrow to her, but all through, the whole thing. And then I quickly ran up and down and got extra fan content, and that had to be the story. And as it turned out, it was a brilliant story. And I did that again at a Harry Potter premiere in London when I didn't get enough of the Potter stars. So you just have to be able to spin on a dime and be flexible and not give up, and hope that you will still get the story. But they're long days, and Cannes is up at 6 to be in a queue to see a film, bed at midnight, 1 a.m, and it's for 10 days straight. And at the end of it, you feel like you've been in a war zone, but you have seen so many extraordinary films that your heart and your brain and all of your creative synapses, you haven't had a lot of sleep, but you've been nourished in so many other ways. I've only ever done Cannes twice, and both extraordinary, and opportunities to sit with Ryan Gosling, to sit with Salma Hayek, to sit with Kate Blanchett, and just see and absorb everything that Cannes is. So I know how lucky I've been.
In that respect as well, taking it closer to home, and this is the thing I've always loved about what you've been doing and the work that you've been doing, Kate, is the fact that you've been a tireless supporter of New Zealand filmmakers as well. Why has that always been such a huge thing for you, being like an advocate for the New Zealand film industry?
Because we're so fucking great. When I say we, I don't mean me, because I couldn't write a limerick. You look at the depth of our storytelling. If you look at the fact that it's steeped in Te Ao Māori, in the sense that storytelling is so strong. If you take whether it's a Peter Jackson or a Taika, or, as I recently was so joyous to be reminded of, and the reason I was in Paris was for the Unifrance Junket, 4 days of talking to French filmmakers about films they have releasing in Aotearoa coming up in the next 12 months. And I decided at the end of every interview, I did about 20 of them, I'd say, look, are you familiar with, New Zealand films and filmmakers? And every single one who answered, who didn't say, I don't know, they all said Jane Campion, which obviously it's France and the piano being huge, but a lot of them, Power of the Dog was also a huge box office success in France as well. And, you look at the Jane Campions and the Gayleen Prestons, and I don't know, it's just, there are so many stories here and so many different ways of telling those stories. They're all, the universality of them could still be amazing. You take a Tina, or you take a Once Were Warriors, and look beyond these borders, and how those kinds of films succeed, but it's how many years of Wilder People? I think it's 10 years this year since Hunt for the Wilder People came out. Tua Fraser was posting the other day, it's 20 years since number 2, which was the first New Zealand film junket I ever did. And with the Fijian connection of that film, and I became friends with Tua as a result because he's a legend. It's one of those, every day something, in fact, even as we sit here, we've had trailers come out. One today for Caterpillar, the first directorial outing for Chelsea Preston Crayford. I can't wait to see it. The trailer looks amazing. You've got Holy Days. There was a trailer for that last week. This year is going to be full of New Zealand films. And as I said, you've got Mardama opening in cinemas next week, which is like, and I haven't seen anything like it before, a gothic Māori horror set in the 1700s. So they just keep coming. And I've done, judged Show Me Shorts. I've been patrons for different film festivals and also mentorships for school kids making films, short films and documentaries. And every single time I'm just overwhelmed by the passion that filmmakers and storytellers bring to it. So it's pretty frickin' easy to be into New Zealand films, and especially when they go out into the world. And we talk about the Toronto Film Festival. What a great festival. It's fucking enormous. And sitting in that cinema when Jojo Rabbit premiered, it's just like, what just happened? What an incredible moment, and how that felt. You knew he was going to be huge at that point. This was pre-Thor, and I was just like, whoa, what? And it's a shared sense of national pride, even if you had nothing to do with it. You still kind of, they make us proud, don't we? We love it when our stuff does well overseas, but it's also, we need to understand what a taonga it is to have these stories here, and that we need to support them and go and see them.
Couldn't agree more. And I think the best way I can put it is the translation of the fact that people here will regularly ask me about Hunt for the Wilder People. Argentines who can't even speak English, but still can understand the kind of comic timing of anything that is like New Zealand films. And it's hilarious how often I hear it referenced in a poor English accent. It's incredible. So it's that and What We Do in the Shadows, weirdly, are the two that I regularly get comments on from people over here.
Wow, fascinating. Not Flight of the Conchords?
Not at all.
Okay.
Hardly ever, surprisingly, which is, strange in itself. And another thing that I'd love to touch on is how you unintentionally became like a spokesperson for menopause. Now, I was actually I was speaking to my girlfriend about this before we came on to chat. And why is it that you feel that particular subject matter has resonated with so many people, and why it has been so important for yourself to get up and kind of talk about it?
Because nobody frickin' was, and I just had to stumble to it on my own. As I said, lost mum really young, so I kind of didn't have her sort of saying, oh, you're not stressed, sweetheart, you're menopausal, because I would have gone, what the fuck is that? And also I'm too young, or whatever it might be. It just wasn't a conversation that was taking place for me. And if that's like 10 years ago, I was already perimenopausal at that stage, and I'm sure your girlfriend will talk you through what all of that means, because I now know, and the last sort of 5 years particularly, that the conversation is so much more normalised. And we've seen it all over the world. Women are having much more open conversations. And also it's promoted a lot more information and research into menopause and what it is and what it does to our hormones, and how women's brains are actually different from men's brains. No shit, except that the entire medical database is based on the male brain. And all the different things that hormones can do to you, and how they can individually affect us. But I just blamed a whole lot of other things. Max was a toddler. I thought, he's fucking annoying and I'm always tired. I'm working full time. We always blame something else as women. And also we just, and a lot of men, you just keep calm and carry on. And I was definitely not staying calm, Jamie. I was an absolute Fruit Loop. And it all got kicked off during COVID when I was chatting to Ryan and reviewing a film. And as you will have gathered from this podcast, is that I'm never short of a word. I have no issue with my brain connecting to my mouth. And often that's to my detriment. And I'm not saying that sensible things and coherent things come out of my mouth, but something will always arrive and I will communicate. And live on air, I just completely lost my way. And I'll never forget that feeling. worst feeling in the frickin' world. And I thought, this just isn't me. And as I said, with the Tom Cruise junket for Maverick, just my confidence was taking a bit of a hit. But I was just so rage-fueled. Just keep me away from any sharp implement, because I will do physical damage to someone that changes lanes without indicating. So I was just a maelstrom of emotion. So Ryan said one day, fuck, you're annoying, and oh my God, where's my nice friend gone to? And he was hosting the AM show here in New Zealand at the time, and he said, you keep banging on about menopause. I don't even know what it is, and I don't care. He's gay. He doesn't know anything about vaginas. So he said, why don't we talk through it? And he got me on air, and I was sitting in this lounge, and I think the reality of doing it via Zoom, I was kind of slightly removed from, I don't know what it was, but it ended up being an incredibly, even for mainstream television, it was borderline, a very open and intimate description, perhaps, of how menopause had impacted my life. And it kind of took off from there. And I think New Zealand was ready for that. There were already other people chatting about it, but I think there were just a couple of things that kind of tipped it over the edge. And so I did kind of stumble into it, because this went fecking mental. Absolutely mental. The DMs coming in from women, horror stories about how menopause had affected their lives and how they'd had to quit their jobs and their marriages had broke, big ticket stuff. And that's when I realised that this was pretty big. So I did a couple more kind of magazine articles and things, and then got involved with them, just general. I did a lot of podcasts, but also then it became about why aren't we getting the right patches, and getting involved with women who were really starting to lobby the government about the proper estradiol patches and a whole lot of other things. So it hasn't been a driving intentional force. It's just helping out kind of. And when Paddy Gower has issues, they came to me and said, let's do a whole primetime show on menopause. I went, fuck yeah, we're going to do that. Amazing set of producers, males and females, and we put together a primetime show about women's health, Jamie, which in itself felt like just a gargantuan achievement. So I'm pretty also TV3 so supportive of all of that. And now I just think it's, I talk about this stuff with people in the queue at the supermarket, and a lot more men now, and as it should be, are so better informed about what's going on with their partners. And, half the population's going to go through it. And the more people that know about it and can seek help for it, or choose not to seek help for it, information is power. So it became kind of an important thing, accidentally, for me to bang on about.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a moment. Thanks for staying with us.
Also, one other thing I'd love to touch on is the fact that you became a parent at a much older age, and you've said it multiple times that you are in this stage of saying it felt like exactly the right time. And I know for a lot of parents, I've met parents of various ages. A good example, actually, and I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning this. My girlfriend, her mother had her and her sisters at the age of 50. And so this whole thing of becoming a parent at a much older age is becoming more and more common. What do you feel was the massive, I guess, change for you in perspective compared to maybe other friends of yours who had children at a much younger age? What do you think it taught you compared to maybe if you had a kid in your 30s, for example? Which I know is the common thing for a lot of Kiwis. They have families when they're incredibly young, sometimes when they're unprepared. Do you felt like you were more prepared because you had your son at a much older age? Well, not much older age, but you get what I mean.
Much older age it was 45, and you're considered a geriatric mother, I think. Any time over sort of 27, you're a geriatric mother. But I remember sitting with the obstetrician, and he was just shaking his head a little bit, in the sense that he couldn't really. He needed me to understand how unusual it was to fall pregnant. I love that fall. It's like you fall on a penis. You don't. But my partner at the time was 16 years younger than me. I said I couldn't have kids, so there was no real, because you don't have kids at 45. And also with TMI, but I only had one fallopian tube, and I just thought, that ship has sailed. And then suddenly I'm pregnant, naturally pregnant. So it's like a 0.01 chance of getting pregnant at that age, naturally, not through IVF. So that in itself was unusual. And he said there's potential complications down through the track, and also in the later stages of pregnancy, stillborn stats are very high in older mothers. So a whole lot of things we kind of had to consider. So he was equipping me with all the negative talk, but I knew sitting there in that minute, because I also didn't discover I was pregnant till quite late down the track because it seemed unfeasible. But I was just so certain that this baby was going to be born and he was going to be healthy. I knew it was going to be a boy before we knew it was a boy. It was just a very, very weird kind of a time for me, because I thought that ship had sailed, and B, as I mentioned about not getting a job as a nanny, kids and I have never necessarily, I'm the good time aunt, used to swing in from overseas with flash things from foreign places and then get hammered with their mother. I was no qualms saying how self-absorbed I was. London was one party after another party. I didn't like the idea of having responsibility, and that was all the way through my 30s. And then I had a job that involved getting on a plane, sometimes once a week, if not every 2 weeks, at least once a month. So it was just, I don't know, it just wasn't happening. And I loved my friends' kids. I loved my nieces. I still adore them. So I had that kind of nourishment. And I had enough kind of in my life. But as it turned out, a frequency is what my obstetrician said. That Max's dad is very handsome. So the frequency with which we indulged in the procreating of a child possibly led to the pregnancy. So yes, but again, you talk about the conversation around women and the judgment that people have about what age you are, and suddenly your body's public property where people rub your tummy in the fucking dairy, and but also
Bloody
just
hell,
a lot.
that's aggressive.
I have a lot of women who'll be listening to this and they're suddenly realising that their body parts are up for conversation. Oh, you're not breastfeeding. Oh, you had the baby via C-section. Why didn't you have a natural birth? All of that bollocks. So I approached it in that way, and then, but I felt I know it's probably the hormones, but I was powerful, man. I was fierce, everything about me, and my body was strong. I had amazing hair, my skin was amazing, and I was bloody enormous. He was a big baby when he came out. I had a lot of ginger crunch leading up to that, and I had a hassle-free, didn't have any nausea, nothing. I was just like, I carried on. I worked up until the day before I had Max, and it was just a magical time. And then he came out, and then that all stopped, and then I didn't realise that they don't sleep, and they require feeding all the time, and I haven't really recovered from that since. That's not true, but it was that first year of keeping a baby alive was the hardest year of my fucking life. No, absolutely, hands down, no question, and the most amazing year of my life. And I think I just got everything out of my system, and I was ready to 100% focus. I'm a late bloomer, so I felt like emotionally I was ready, and I was ready to stop being so self-absorbed and selfish and make my life about somebody else. And it was just a big change, because in a relationship as well. And Tristan had a lovely little daughter who just walked past before. She's now 18. She was only 2.5, 3 when we got together, so she was now part of my life as well. So I was step parenting. So it was just a fucking crazy time. And then you get really smug. I did all these articles and magazines about you can be any age and any age of a parent, and women are having babies later. We can do it whenever we want, and all of that. And I stand by it as true. But I'm 58 now. He's 13. I'm so fucking tired. And I'm just glad. His dad and I are no longer together, but he's still, younger than me, and he's very energetic and, likes football and sport and rugby and all these things. So, I take Max to a Star Wars back-to-backer, and we'll binge watch Avatar, and we'll binge watch Stranger Things, and his dad will take him to the football field. So we've kind of got the co-parenting from that perspective works out, because I'm going to be honest, the energy levels 100% come down. And I also feel I've brought Max up as a Gen X, right? So I parent like I guess I was parented, but I also parent because I've got other things to do. Yes, you're amazing and I love you, but I need you to cook your own dinner in the air fryer, the keys in the lockbox. He knows when I travel, I always come back. We're very, very, very close, and we have so much shared love for all sorts of things, thankfully, including Star Wars. And I'm lost without him. He started back at school. He started high school last week, and I'm not with him every day of the holidays, and I miss him like I'm missing a limb. But we also, I don't know, I think I feel guilty sometimes I haven't given him a childish childhood, because I made him basically watched Stranger Things when he was 10. So I think it's a mix of, he's been more of an adult as a kid. But we all bring our kids up the way we bring our kids up, don't we? I mean, there's no fucking manual as well, which is mind-blowing to me. You have to get a driver's license to drive a car, but you can just have a kid. So he's had to learn with me. He's had to roll with my hormonal punches, as has poor Jada. She's had estrogen landing in her body as a teenager and living through me with estrogen leaving my body, as well as solo parent for the last 5 years and work full-time. So we're going to have days where we just fucking scream at each other, and I won't wake up feeling guilty about. I always say sorry. I will always say sorry to my kids because I want them to understand that that's important. And also, I want kids to grow up to have personal responsibility. I'm not going to have this continuing, let's sue someone for something that's your fault. Just own whatever decisions you make and the repercussions and the consequences of them. Apologise if you need to. Make amends if you need to. Always pay the money back if you need to. I just want them and him and also Jada to just have personal responsibility for the decisions they make and the lives they lead. So that's kind of my vibe.
And I love that vibe. And one quote I really have to throw out there, just purely because of what you were mentioning earlier, was I feel like you really do live by Han Solo's words, which is never tell me the odds, which is fantastic that you kind of did it that way. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. And in terms of the fact that you are a massive fan of Star Wars, I've been holding my tongue for so long because
I've been waiting,
I'm a
Jamie.
massive fan of Star Wars myself. You mentioned multiple people, Mando, obviously Tony Gilroy, who directed one of the best series that has ever come out of Star Wars. Sorry, but I love Andor.
My God. My God. I want to watch that series again. I've watched it twice. Max watched it with me the second time. I don't know. It gets better and better on rewatches.
100%. And I think this is probably kind of leaning into that a little bit. Do you think if you ever stopped being a fan of film in general, you would still be able to do this job? Or do you think a big part of the job is the fact that you are such a massive fan? And especially with Star Wars, I saw in your email profile picture that you've got a picture with Mark Hamill, of course. Do you think fandom really does drive the passion in this industry and really does
100%.
drive you forward?
And you can tell. So you've got your reporters that are trying to, that need to just get a grab for the 6 o'clock primetime CBS News in Missouri or whatever it might be, and that's different. That's kind of celebrity news, which I have to force myself to be more interested in often, because if I do get a massive primetime interview with a Taylor Swift, well, she's not a film person, but let's put Taylor Swift aside. Let's pick, I can't even remember now, pick me somebody that I've done. Harrison Ford. Let's do that for The Force Awakens. There's an element of needing to get other stuff where all I want to do is talk about Star Wars, and I can't do that because it's for a mainstream audience, but you still come in with passion and knowledge. I don't think, and it's really interesting you asked me that. A couple of years ago, Jada said to me, and it really, really resonated with me. She said, you've always said, you get a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life, just follow your passion. And she said, but so do you think that that's more important than getting a job that pays your bills? And this is, let's just say I've evolved perhaps over the years, because at my age I still have a massive mortgage and recovering from a relationship breakup in terms financially, and I feel like I'm going to be working till the day I die just to just to pay off my bills. There's got to be a bit of both, right? And I do believe in this day and age as well that if you get a job that respects your personal boundaries, that does pay all of your bills that you don't hate, leaving you time to actually invest your real love for whatever it might be. It might be gardening, it might be, drawing models of gnomes, whatever it might be. You could do that in your spare time and it's your passion. So I kind of feel a little differently, mainly too because how lucky am I that I got to, that's all I can say, how absolutely lucky was I to get this job. Yes, it's never paid my bills, but it's given me just the most amazing joy, and so many of these experiences that have fundamentally enriched my life, like walking into a room with Luke Skywalker and I'm just my 10-year-old self just going, is this really happening? And then having a few tears about it. Well, every single reporter that came out of Mark Hamill's room at that junket was in some emotional disarray. Wizened old 60-year-old print journos, that probably haven't cried in 20 years. And they have that effect on you because it's not just a nostalgia thing. It's part of who you are. And if you have that level of passion and fandom, then and you get someone like Mark Hamill that really respects that. Harrison Ford, not so much.
But I kind of appreciate that.
He's also almost in character. Yeah. Whereas it was Mark's a little. I never got to do Carrie Fisher, to my absolute heartbreak. But what a queen she was. So no, an answer to your question is I think passion always helps, and you can't fake it. You can be enthusiastic, but I know unbelievably enthusiastic tax lawyers, or who love what they do and whatever it is that they do. And they get paid a lot more than I do. I wish I was enthusiastic about tax law. I'd live in a much nicer house and I wouldn't have any debt. But I think you have to, if you choose to spend time doing something, first of all, do it to the best of your ability, if nothing else. And second, if you're lucky enough to feel passionately about it, then you can. And the passion also drives the content, don't forget. So if I'm going to walk into Mark Jennings' office and say, I want to go to the 30th celebrations of Star Wars, and he's going, no, you're not. I said, yeah, it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to take a cameraman and we're going to file all this phenomenal content. And you have to be convincing enough to get them to sign the check, to let them, or if they're going to Tokyo for The Last Jedi, or whatever it might be, you have to get them on board like anything. You've got to persuade someone that it's going to be great and then deliver it so that the next time he just says, oh yeah, whatever, go off and do it. Or just stop annoying me, go off and do it. And to understand, the fandom for Star Wars is so gargantuan that there's no way that you can not do it. And Rings is the same. Disney rang and asked me to host the Avatar red carpet at the end of last year. When they did Fire and Ash in Wellington, what an amazing day. Probably not everyone said it's the biggest premiere they've had there since the last Lord of the Rings. And you think what Rings did to the New Zealand film industry, but you think about that fan base, man. I had to host a red carpet for the last Hobbit film, The Battle of the Five Armies. It was at Leicester Square in London, and I co-hosted the carpet with a guy from Sky. And my job, it was live streamed, I think, to, 100 countries. And I just had to interview all of the talent as they came out of the limos. And it was everybody, obviously, from PJ, but Sarah McKellen, and obviously everybody that were in the Hobbit films. And the fandom, the level of their costuming and their and how passionate they were. And I've seen fans on red carpets from Twilight to Lord of the Rings, to whether they're just Tom Cruise fans or whether they're Guardians of the Galaxy fans, all in costume. The Japanese particularly are so amazing to dress up in costume for carpets. And I just worship at the altar of people that are that passionate, and I feed off it, and I bloody love it.
And one question that I've always been curious about, because yes, I understand, Kate, you're an entertainment reporter, but at times you do kind of have to be a bit of a critic as well. Is there a balance of you having to, because you obviously love film, and in that respect as well, you kind of, are there points where sometimes being honest about a film can be a little bit trying? Like, I know, for example, you did the junket for the newest Fantastic Four film, where all of the cast even hated it. Is there a fine balance of, obviously, you do need to be enthusiastic, but you can also be a little bit honest when something doesn't work or when it's not good? Or is it you always have to be turned on, and there has to be elements that you need to find that are positive about every project?
No, first of all, there's two ways to look at this. I'm in an unusual position, and I was a lovely friend of mine who unfortunately passed away, who had a job identical to mine in Belgium, and there's another friend of mine, Anne, who had an identical job as I did in Copenhagen, where we have to supply interview content, but also there's a review capacity. So when it comes to publicists, in the early days, I really had to establish very clearly that if I'm going to come over and do Johnny Depp for Pirates, and the film is it's a 2-star at best, that you have to allow me to do that interview, which will be judgment-free, and then I will publish my review, which will be scathing. And there was a bit of blowback from marketing for some people, but I was always defended by the publicists, because there's no point being a critic if you love everything or hate everything. No one's going to trust you. So I have been really brutally honest, but we're also human beings. So I'm not going to sit down with Christopher Nolan and say, my God, Interstellar really sucked, but how was it to make the film? Which clearly I didn't, because Interstellar is one of the greatest films ever made. But I have to interview people for films that are average, for films that are amazing but that I didn't like. And you do have to put that aside. But it's also, I'm never going to go in and go, oh my God, that film changed my life. It's amazing. I would never say that for a film that didn't. So the tell, if you watched any of my full interviews, is that I would never start with anything too effusive, but it would be, there's ways around it, And you talk about the Fantastic Four. It was way, way back in the day. So it was the Miles Teller, Kate Mara one. So it was on from the first one that I did. So it was, you're right. It was the reboot before the Pedro Pascal revisitation. And Michael B. Jordan as well. And it was the four of them. But it was in New York. We all walked out. All of the media who flew over for it from the screening and in silence just looked at each other and went, what the fuck?
What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? Because it wasn't just average, it was so bad. Anyway, the publicists scrambled, and instead of all of us having one-on-ones with the four cast, they were all put together in one interview, and it was for 4 minutes, and it was just awful. Miles Teller was an absolute little prick, and he's definitely grown up since then, and he was charming and far more aware of himself for the Maverick Junket. It had been a long time, but they just knew, they were young. The film was awful, and it was just a bad scene and a bad vibe. So that's kind of how you have to get around it. I have to do a lot of junkets of films that I didn't like. It's not about what I thought about the film in that moment. It's about other people that might like it. Like my brother, if I love a film, it's 5 stars, he won't go to it. But if I give it 2 stars, he's signing up, because we have completely opposite tastes in film. Well, I have great taste and he doesn't. So, we all have our different reviewers that like different things. There's reviewers in New Zealand that I'll always feel differently from for different reasons, and I'm an emotional film critic, I guess, but I'm also, my editorial content is, as I said, is mainstream. My review content is 100% me. And whether you like it or not. So, and I get lots of hate online and in the early days, letters, what's a woman doing reviewing an action film? What does she know about action? Or, who is that ridiculous woman? Why doesn't she like Owen Wilson and Adam Sandler and some piece of crap? Or a great film that I just didn't really connect with. And that's it. I want conversation. Stop me. Convince me why you liked it. And often, if you do give say something really controversial or negative about a film, or you promote a film that's considered to be, way back in the day, like Trainspotting, and that's abhorrent, and the Catholic Church had a shift that it's promoting, drug use. And you go, have you seen the film? No. I'm not going to talk to you. There's no way I'm going to have a conversation with someone because they saw a trailer to a film and they're going to take exception at my review of the entire film, or even or they read about it somewhere, So just back yourself if you're going to take me on. Come at me, but do it with some integrity, please. Yeah, it can be challenging.
I love that, because I almost take the opinion of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the film critic Armin White, who is renowned as being a contrarian. Essentially, he will see the worst films, give them 5-star reviews, and see something that is like poignant, beautiful, like Oscar worthy, and he'll be like, this is dog shit, it's boring. Like it's possibly one of the best things I've ever read, which I think one of his more recent reviews, I think, was like Space Jam, saying it was like the best written thing that's ever been created, which obviously is a massive ad. And it kind of takes me back to what you said about like your brother, and I feel the same about my father, who will watch any Jean-Claude Van Damme film and be like, this is the best thing ever made. Yet I'll take
it's JCVD, Jamie. What do you mean?
Yeah, true. Exactly. I need to think about this a bit more in depth. I'm obviously not understanding the depth he has. But yeah, it's great. And I do love that everyone will have a differing opinion on, regardless of any film, there will always be some interesting point that someone will take away from it. Much like couldn't we take that approach to everything? Yeah. Massively.
Except if it's something. I mean, we need to understand how other people who think differently from us, how they think. We can still come to the same conclusion about that person, obviously, but unless we have conversation around it, we might not know. And also the universality of the connection of movies. And if you take something like Star Wars, and don't get me wrong, there is a toxic underbelly to fandom as well.
Massively. But
you'll be walking. Was over for one of the Rings films and was in Selfridges because I knew that they had some really good Star Wars merch. Ended up buying a 1 meter high Darth Vader. But as I was walking around, this random dude started chatting, not in a flirty way or even a pickup way, but just we started, and it ended up having like this half-hour, he was from Peru, half-hour conversation about Star Wars, something random that I forget. And it was just like a total stranger, and off we went on our lives. But we'd had this kind of, you have this opportunity to connect. And when I see fans that are gathered on red carpets, and there was an amazing one for the final Harry Potter, and and I did all the fans for that, and they come from all over the world. And there was these amazing fans from South America who had saved for 5 years. They'd learned to speak English from the Harry Potter books, and they all did all this fundraising because they knew that they wanted to come to one of the Harry Potter premieres. And the emotion, floods of tears, but also just, the connectivity. They were friends for life. They were bonded. And I think that's where fandom is a beautiful thing. And even we think about before the internet, how everyone used to connect. This was a way to do it, even if it wasn't connecting as we do now so easily. I remember way back in the day at TV3, because I was in the early days of IMDb, and I just thought, this is so awesome. This dude started in his mother's basement, with VHSs with people around the world. So when I was in Britain, I went and chatted to the guy who set it up, Colin, and he was living in a house in Brighton, just out of London, as you know, and I went and interviewed him there, Bristol, not Brighton, and did a story on IMDb. And then you look at how they're doing now and how fully involved they are with the industry. And that was just fans. And that was people that just wanted to sit in their basements and write 750,000 credits out and share it as a database. And they started as shareable, Excel spreadsheets back in the day. So it's connectivity. And I think as human beings, that's what we want. We're getting it through binge watching as well, not just cinema, where it's just like, oh my God, are you watching Industry? Or oh my God, are you watching Game of Thrones? We want to connect, and this is a way we can do it.
Listening to the Beyond Broadcast podcast, sponsored by WIZZFX. Bespoke podcast branding done right. If you like what you hear, please rate the show 5 stars on your preferred platform. Follow at Beyond Broadcast Pod on Instagram and subscribe for new episode updates.